93 million people in one of the wealthiest regions on Earth are living on the edge of poverty. That is not a statistic from a struggling nation. That is the European Union right now. For decades, Brussels has promised prosperity for all, open markets, shared currency, free movement. But behind the glossy headlines, 1 in 5 Europeans wakes up every single day wondering how they'll cover rent, food, or heating. So what is the EU actually doing about it? And can it possibly work by the deadline it's set for itself? Let's break it down. Back in 2017, EU leaders gathered to sign something called the European Pillar of Social Rights, a list of 20 principles meant to guarantee fair jobs, fair wages, and fair protection for every citizen from Lisbon to Lithuania. 4 years later, at a summit in the coastal city of Porto, pronounced Port 2, that promise became a number, a very specific one. By 2030, the EU committed to lifting at least 15 million people out of poverty or social exclusion, 5 of them children. It sounded ambitious, it sounded historic, but numbers on paper don't feed anyone. Fast forward to today, and the picture is uncomfortable. According to the European Commission's own data, over 93 million people across the bloc are still at risk of poverty or social exclusion. That includes roughly 20 million children, a quarter of all kids in the EU. Progress has been uneven, to say the least. Some member states pushed forward with minimum income reforms and early childhood investment. Others barely moved the needle. And here's the uncomfortable question critics keep asking. Is this just another framework of good intentions or a real plan with teeth? In response, the European Commission unveiled its first ever dedicated anti-poverty strategy, a document designed to actually connect the dots between existing programs like the European Child Guarantee and the European Youth Guarantee. The strategy is built around 3 pillars. First, tackling poverty across a person's entire life cycle, from childhood to working age to old age. Second, confronting the forces that make poverty worse, things like discrimination and the rising cost of living that's been squeezing households across the continent. And third, fixing governance itself, better funding, better monitoring, actual accountability instead of vague commitments that quietly disappear after the press conference ends. There's also a housing component, a European affordable housing plan aimed at helping families find stable, decent places to live without draining their entire income just to keep a roof over their heads. But not everyone is convinced this goes far enough. The European Parliament has actually pushed for something bolder, a proposal to eradicate poverty entirely by 2035, arguing the EU needs to address the deeper structural causes: unequal wealth distribution, weak public services, and housing that's simply out of reach for millions. Analysts point out a deeper imbalance too. The EU pours significant resources into employment and equality initiatives, but social inclusion, the piece that actually catches people falling through the cracks, remains chronically underfunded. In other words, the EU is good at creating opportunity, it's still struggling to catch the people opportunity leaves behind. So where does that leave us with less than 4 years until the 2030 deadline? The EU has the frameworks, it has the targets. What it's missing is the uniform political will across 27 very different governments to actually deliver. Whether this becomes a genuine turning point for European social policy or just another chapter in a long history of ambitious targets quietly missed will depend on what happens in the next few years, not the next few decades. If you want to understand the forces really shaping Europe's future, don't stop here. Check out the video on your screen right now and hit subscribe because this story is far from over.
Il ne respecte jamais mon travail. Alors, comment est-ce qu'on peut reformuler ça en communication non violente?
Il vaut mieux dire il fait n'importe quoi s'il est...
Au travail, il ne prit pas le temps de lire tout le temps.
Elle ne lit pas.
Oui,
Toi, tu as écrit quelque chose et la personne ne lit pas. Comment est-ce qu'on peut se sentir au travail quand on a l'impression que le chef, par exemple, ne répond pas au travail qu'on a fourni? Charles, tu as une idée?
Quelqu'un qui ne respecte pas les règles du travail.
Ça précise exactement pourquoi on parle mal. Parce qu'on parle mal en soi, ça ne veut pas dire grand-chose. cette personne ou ces personnes arrivent toujours à 8h15 alors que le travail commence à 8h. Il y a des gens qui se parlent toujours mal pour moi, mais en fait entre eux c'est normal peut-être. Donc qu'est-ce qu'on